Museums have an origami-like relationship with time because visitors can fold together different eras as they navigate through the galleries. 2 exhibitions currently on view are perfect for folding together. They cover 3 centuries and half the globe, but they both contain works that were criticized in their time for not being art because they were printed. The exhibitions are Paintings in Print and In Our Time. In Our Time is an exhibition of screen prints by the painter R.B. Kitaj, created during the late 1960s. They're a series of covers and dust jackets of books that were meaningful to Kitaj. Paintings in Print looks at books printed in China during the 17th and 18th centuries that greatly expanded the audience for painting and art. Part of that exhibition is the Ten Bamboo Studio Collection.
The Ten Bamboo Studio Collection of calligraphy and painting is an 8-part book that was first printed in 1633. And it's almost like an art book. It uses multiple colors. It involved the participation of hundreds of calligraphers and painters and carvers and printers. It really seems as though each print was meant to be appreciated as something like an artwork.
R.B. Kitaj was the author of his prints, but he did not actually print them. They were produced by Chris Prater and his team at Kelpra Studios. These works pushed against the edges of what people considered art at that time.
Some art critics have criticized screen printing because of that collaboration, because you cannot see the hand of the artist. But honestly, I see his mind here. I think that at the time they were experimenting with screen printing, but it was still art, which means that it was meaningful because it was one work of art. So the series itself is a work of art, is an imagined library in print. That's how I like to call it.
Printing was denigrated at the time as being incapable of expressing anything of an artist because it was carved, it wasn't painted, and the people who did the carving came from a different social class, and consequently there was no subjectivity involved.
Block printing originated in Asia and was widely used by the 7th century, but screen printing, in the modern sense, really was not developed until the early 20th century. And with screen printing, each color gets its own screen, and when combined perfectly, they layer together a single image. Although in the 17th century, the Ten Bamboo Studio Collection perfected a similar innovation called Douban.
So the Ten Bamboo Studio Collection was transformational, particularly in terms of technology. It used a relatively new printing technique called Douban, which literally means like assembled blocks. And what it involves, it's a way of producing multicolor prints. So previously, you would have a wood block, you would smear black ink on it, and then place a sheet of paper and rub it until the impression was made. If you wanted to do multiple colors, you would have to apply multiple colors by hand to the block or to the completed print. With Douban, each color of the print has a separate block. So if you have, a red pomegranate with a green leaf and a gray rock, each of those 3 elements will be a separate block. And the printer will then ink each of the blocks separately, each will be printed separately. And the challenge really is to make sure that everything aligns to create a cohesive image. If you're even a millimeter off, of course, immediately the viewer will notice. So this book I don't think it was the first publication to use this technique, but it was the first to use it really extensively and successfully.
Kitai designed the screen prints from this series in Los Angeles while he was teaching art at UCLA. Chris Prater was in London. Through that transatlantic collaboration, these prints came to life. Kitai would send objects, letters, sketches, and photographs, and proofs were sent back and forth until he was satisfied with the results. For Kitai, this labor-intensive and complicated process had an immediacy that didn't exist for him in painting. Kitai said the practice of making these prints was as close to spontaneity as I've ever managed to come.
I mean, I don't know what Kitai was thinking when he wrote that, but because of the way in which he was working when he was painting, coming back to his work, painting, revising, repainting a section that he didn't like, that process of pondering over his paintings, while for a screen print, it's like, of course you get ready to produce it, and so there's a lot of thinking before that happens, but then it happens in one act, or in an act that has several phases. But then it happens, and it's produced in multiple copies, so it's done. Instead, I think that when you are painting something and you want that painting to look good, to be perfect, then you keep revising it and you keep working on it until you are satisfied. And then I don't know, will you be satisfied ever? That I don't know.
The challenge for the printer really is to ensure that they can impress each of these blocks so that the impression will appear exactly where it needs to within the image. And one of, I guess, the kind of amazing things about these prints is that the blocks and colors really do overlap a lot. So you get a lot of layering of color, which creates the impression that it is more painting-like.
I was in the galleries last week and I saw visitors here wondering if these book covers were real or not. And they had doubts about that. And I think Kitai would be so satisfied with those comments. Because yes, they are so well done that they look real. And some people may think that it's real book covers framed, but it's not. These are prints portraying those book covers.